Rutgers Rant. Early January, first one of 2020. Joined as always by James Cratch, Keith Sargent. We've got a big show today, fellas. We're going to talk a lot about the coaching staff for Rutgers football. We're going to dive deep into what I think is probably the latest biggest game in a long time for the Rutgers basketball program tomorrow night against Penn State. We've got some recruiting stuff, hoop stuff, all sorts of good stuff to talk about. Fellas, how you doing?
Good. Doing well. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you too. And it's been a happy New Year for Rutgers football. I got to tell you, and Crash, this is funny. We, not to dive too deeply in what we do as a website, but there are times when we put posts on the website that is just really internet candy, right? Where we just take something, a topic like, hey, what would be, the greatest combination of places to get Taylor ham and egg, whatever the heck it is. And one of these posts was, what would be Rutgers' dream staff under Greg Schiano? And you throw out all these names, and it was like, oh yeah, that looks really great. And now we're closing in on, do you actually getting the dream, Greg Schiano signing your staff? And it's kind of funny. I mean, what do you make of this? I mean, do you think that what he's done to assembling a coaching staff has exceeded, what was possible?
I don't put it this way. I'm a little surprised that they really haven't hit a hiccup yet. Now, they may end up hitting a hiccup with Anthony Campanelli, who I'm sure we'll discuss in a second. But no, I mean, and I want to say one thing, that wasn't just yes, it was part guesswork, and obviously I'm not too naive or my ego's not inflated to the point where I don't realize there's a little bit of luck involved that all these guys have actually made the staff. But, I put that list together having talked to people about what they thought Greg might do. And I think, that's where a lot of those names came from. Now, look, I'm not going to get them all. I know right now Bob Bostad's not going to be the offensive line coach. But I think we got most of them because A, they're obvious names that, have ties to Rutgers, have ties to Greg, have ties to New Jersey. But B, and I think this is the big thing, Rutgers is a war chest now, which is something they have never had before when it comes to assistant coaches.
Crazy.
So, yes, I mean, I think Jim Panagos is the perfect example. Jim Panagos is paid well at Minnesota, and when PJ Fleck got that new deal, as we talked about a couple weeks ago on the podcast, Minnesota basically said, we're going to throw $1 million into your coaching pool immediately to give everybody raises. Well, Greg goes and gets Jim Panagos, and in year 2 is going to pay him double what Chris Ash paid his defensive line coach, Corey Brown, last season.
Incredible. It really is. It is really wild. And, and looking at the hires he made, the one I thought he had to make, he had to get somebody who would be, would bring an offensive vision to this thing, who would have, his finger on the pulse of the way the college game is going. We couldn't go back to, what he was doing when he was here last time. So Sean Gleason comes in. Sarge, this is funny now. And I got an email from somebody who is as strong a Schiano acolyte as there is in the world, who actually asked me, his resume is a little thin. Are we sure about this? And it's funny when you think about it because, and I don't want to drop this name and any sense of the comparison between Drew Mehringer, but, it's a young guy who doesn't have a lot of experience, who is already about, coming to his third job. What in your mind will set him apart from, say, the other coordinators that they've had for this offense?
So, obviously, his biggest, where he just was at was Oklahoma State, and they had some success, but, Oklahoma State kind of disappointed this past season. From all accounts, everyone who I talked to, I've done stories over at Princeton. I've talked to people over there. And Crash can probably attest to this too. He's very into the new, analytics that everyone's talking about. He is very, very, he went to, he's from Princeton. So he, and by all accounts, Bob Serace, what he's doing over there at that program is on the cutting edge, is on the forefront. And by all accounts, he's, very innovative when it comes to, scheme wise. So, by all accounts, he's going to try to, bring in, some, new innovation that, quite frankly, Greg Schiano, he'd be the first one to admit it. I think, he's not an offensive guy. He's going to entrust whoever he was going to hire. he was going to have a guy who's going to take the bulk of the offensive workload. And, in Sean Gleason, I think he found one.
Kratch, you're about to dive deep into him. What do you see in his background that you like? And I guess this is the bigger, broader picture. We've had 15 offensive coordinators in the last, I don't exaggerate only a little bit, 11 and 11. Does it make a difference? I mean, if he's good at his job, will we show up on against Monmouth and go, oh, wow, hey, look at that? Or is it all just a Jimmy's and Joe's kind of thing?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that there are probably creative things that you can do, especially against Monmouth. And Monmouth's a really good football team. And that's going to be a game where I think there's going to be a little bit of juice to it. But I think, yes, it's a Jimmy's and Joe's thing. I think that obviously at Princeton, he had superior talent for the Ivy League. And I think Sarge can kind of attest to this. The Ivy League is very quietly, slowly kind of becoming like everybody else in college football, in terms of they're getting good players. They are finding ways around, they don't have scholarships, but, they've got this, stuff like that. Two, I think they need to win. Like Sean Gleason has more job security, arguably, than any other offensive coordinator in that stretch has had at Rutgers. So I think that's going to help too. This is not a 1 year, flip the switch and it's going to be, the greatest show on turf next year. I think this is going to be a building process, but he's a young guy who is very bright by all accounts. He's got a promising future. Everyone thinks he's going to be a head coach. But I think that's maybe 2-3 years down the road after he kind of turns around his Rutgers offense.
Right. And you mentioned job security, and I think this is the big thing. This is how you end up with, doing a national search, ending with Andy Boo as your defensive coordinator when everyone knows you're going to get fired or might get fired. Greg Schiano's never going to get fired. So anybody who comes here knows they have that. So, the logical question that brings us to Anthony Campanile, what is the holdup there? If there's a full court press between Rutgers and Boston College, fellas, I know he's close to Jeff Hafley, but, I'm a little skeptical as to what between those two places, you'd have to think that you'd have a better chance here, or am I wrong?
It's a great question. I think for Anthony, it comes down to what job is going to make him a head coach at a program that gives him a chance for success the quickest way. I think has to be what look, Rutgers is going to pay him more money, but if he goes back to BC, it goes to a place where him and his family, from what I'm told, enjoyed living, and he was there for 3 years, and he basically recruited all the kids on that roster, defensive players. BC is probably, Rutgers fans don't want to hear it, BC is ready to win faster than Rutgers is at this point in all likelihood.
Do you think so? I watched that bowl game. Really? I mean,
they are.
They've recruited at a higher level.
They've recruited at a higher level. When you're a 6-6 team and your head coach has got fired and you're in some godforsaken bowl game in Birmingham and Eugene Field was literally falling. It shocked me during that thunderstorm that a part of the mezzanine didn't fall on the field or something. That place.
We covered it. We could probably talk about that.
I wasn't there. You must have flashed.
No, and I will say this now. Inside baseball. Sorry to cut you off, Kratch. So I remember it was Brendan Prunty, a former colleague, a former Star Ledger beat reporter. I was at at a rival newspaper, and we're there. I think it might have been the day before the game. They're holding a press conference, and we're there right before, Greg Schiano is walking through. This is the first time he's walking into Legion Field. Legendary Legion Field is the way the bowl reps, build it. And this is literally his first impression of it. They didn't do a walkthrough the day before. They were practicing over at Hoover High School. So this is the first time he's actually, laid eyes on it. And his words, were, let's just say, I don't want to misquote him now. It's, a decade after the fact, but let's just say he was less than impressed by the historic nature of Legion Field. It was very run down, and he looked at it and just couldn't believe his eyes that if you remember, that year they had won, I think, 7 in a row to get to a bowl game. They were on fire. NC State was, a pretty good team. Russell Wilson was a quarterback, by the way, for NC State. So it wasn't a bad, bowl game, couple, two, Power 5 programs. And he just could not believe they had to play there. I remember poking the bear a little bit during the press conference, like 20 minutes later, because I knew, I had just seen him less than impressed. And, I threw a question at him about playing in Legion Field, the historic nature of it, how awesome is it to be, with all the history over at Legion Field. And he shot me daggers. I mean, it was unbelievable. So.
Wasn't that the one, the game they ran out of PapaJohns.com bowl? They ran out of pizza. Wasn't that the game?
They did. That was Bob Mulcahy's last game. They knocked out Russell Wilson in the second quarter. NC State would have won that game going away. Russell Wilson was so far the best player on the field. I remember, I think it was Ryan D'Imperio tackled him near the 10-yard line and, knocked him out of the game. If Russell Wilson, doesn't get hurt in that game, I think NC State would have probably won.
All right. That was a fun little diversion into Birmingham football history here. Crash, to finish your thought. All right. You think Anthony's coming, number one, and number two, round out the rest of the staff then? Who else is he going to hire for the openings he is not officially filled?
So I will say this. I think that Craig's been after Anthony for a month now. On Saturday, and I put this on our Rutgers Sports Insider, for those of you that subscribe know this, and those of you who don't subscribe, you should sign up. All of a sudden, kind of boom. There was a sense of optimism, momentum, the things have changed. Hafley was in the lead, but now Greg is back in the lead. I think they kind of sweetened the pot a little bit financially. It's been status quo since then. I know there was a report that, BC's making their big push. So my answer is, I know Rutgers felt better about getting Anthony than it had this past weekend. Nothing has changed. I haven't been told anything otherwise, but I still think that whether Rutgers fans like to hear it or not, there are several, facets of this decision that weigh in Boston College favor. I think it's, working with Hafley. He probably gets more freedom to run his defense with Hafley than he does with Schiano. I think that the players there, the schedule, the league being easier, the familiarity. So I think it's a very complicated situation that should have a resolution at some point soon. You'd think in the next couple of days, but we've been saying that for a month now.
All right. The rest of the staff, offensive coordinator, another scoop on the Rutgers Insider. If you're paying attention, give us that. Give us Colby Smith. Is he coming back? Augie Hoffman. Well, give me the rest of the staff then.
Sorry, do you want to take Augie real quick?
I have not. I mean, there has to be a spot open for him.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Offensive line coach, we anticipate Andrew Orich. Princeton offensive line and offensive coordinator. He's a guy who replaced Gleason at Princeton. He and Gleason work well together. We anticipate he's going to be the offensive line coach. Taekwon Underwood, wide receiver coach, who I think is going to be an incredible hire.
He's going to work. And people are like, well, does he have the experience? It doesn't matter, guys. He will work well with young athletes. If you spent even 10 minutes around that kid, he is just an energetic, smart, personable dude who's going to be the guy you want to keep track of what these kids are doing off the field. So that's a great hire.
Yeah, great hire, tremendous hire. You remember the Super Bowl media day? I think you were there. Where he was just holding court, and then Belichick being Belichick, cuts him.
And he had every opportunity in the world to be bitter about that, and just wouldn't do it. I mean, that's just his personality. He was happy to be on the roster until the Super Bowl. I mean, it's just he gets cut and replaced with a Rutgers player on the final roster spot. Do you remember who it was?
Yes, Alex Silvestro, another Rutgers.
There you go.
Player.
Good trivia question. We're diving deep today, aren't we? We are just the off season. We are just diving deep. All right, so go on. Augie Hoffman.
Nunzio will probably be in some offensive coaching role, whether it's tight ends or maybe running backs. He has experience coaching both. Colby Smith is still on staff. There's been no formal announcement regarding his status, but I wouldn't be surprised if he gets retained, and then he would be coaching running backs, and that would probably bump Nunzio back down to tight ends. From a defensive standpoint, we talked about Anthony. Bob Fraser's coming back. Now that the Patriots have been ousted, I would expect that to be announced this coming week. And then I guess, like I said, I think there just has to be an opening for Augie.
The one,
go ahead.
The one interesting aspect is that the 10th assistant job is not really earmarked to one side of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at it now, you figure, okay, whether they hire Anthony or not, I tend to think that they're going to have to hire another defensive assistant, and that guy would probably work with the defensive backs, because it seems like it's standard operating procedure now that you've got two guys in the secondary, the safety and cornerback are so different. You look at the offense, obviously we got a coordinator, we have an anticipated offensive line coach, we have a wide receivers coach, you've got Nunzio and you've got Colby Smith still around, so you think, okay, one's tight ends, one's running backs. The question is, what does Greg do with the 10th position? Does he add, and we know that Gleason's going to coach quarterbacks, so there's not going to be a quarterback-specific position coach. My question now is, okay, does Greg have a special teams coordinator? Something Ash didn't have? Does he, have an assistant offensive line coach? Does he have a assistant, defensive line coach? Does he break away the defensive ends and the outside linebackers? So I think that's where it could get creative. And if they can create a spot for a guy like Augie Hoffman, if they want to, maybe with a position that they haven't had in the past or recently.
Right.
The other thing that, a lot of fans might lose sight of, Steve, is, by all accounts of people who I've talked to, he's going to really throw a lot of money at the, recruiting office. I think, he could hire as many as 5 different, maybe 6 different people,
wow,
in that department. Obviously Rick Mance and some other guys are filling that void right now. Rick Mance, I would anticipate gets retained. I've heard a few other high school coaches are in the mix for some roles, which would be interesting. And then, Kevin McConnell, who was Greg's right-hand man, we're anticipating that he's going to be back. He's in more or less a chief of staff role. He's the type of guy who's followed him down to Tampa. He was a longtime deputy AD at Rutgers. So, again, Greg Schiano, a lot of these positions might get lost on the average Rutgers fan, but, clearly, he's trying to get the band back together with as many, of his former people that he worked with. And he's also trying to, hire that dream staff that Cratch, wrote about.
One last thing I would say, with Augie or any high school coach, they've got to be hired to an on-field coaching position, or else there's a moratorium on recruiting their school. And St. Joe's is going to have some of the best players in the state in the upcoming cycle. So I don't see Augie Hoffman being a guy that they hire unless there's been some loophole or rule change for like a recruiting off-field position. I think if he's going to be on the staff, he's going to be one of the 10 on-field assistants.
Good segue right into recruiting. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because, this is a perfect example of why you shouldn't follow recruiting. Jalen Berger, picked running back, best player in the state. Don Bosco picked Wisconsin. Really no surprise. I think what happens here, fellas, and this is my problem I have with recruiting, is if you're a player who decides early on, I'm going to pick a school, I'm going to go to wherever it is, then you kind of fade from consciousness. But if you're someone who, spends a lot of these weights and debates and changes his mind and goes back and forth, you get a disproportionate amount of attention. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just become, in the eyes of fans and people, more important because people have been talking about you for 8 months. I think this is what's happened a little bit with Jalen Berger going to Wisconsin. Todrick Hunt says there's a chance that he could still reopen his recruiting. If I'm a Rutgers fan, I wouldn't count on that. At this point, Wisconsin's where you go if you're a running back from New Jersey. My question to you guys now, what do you think with this class? Is this it? Are we close to being the end as far as, high school players go? And is there someone in the transfer portal that Greg's going to pull out of his pocket at the end here? Cratch, what do you think here?
I think for the most part, obviously, they're going to stand Berger, and obviously Todrick was told, as he put on our text service, that Berger's going to take an official visit to Rutgers while committed to Wisconsin, I guess. I mean, that's not totally out of the realm of possibility. I don't know if that was a firm decision he's going to take the official visit. So obviously, look, they're going to try. They got a month. We'll see if they flip it. I mean, I can't really blame a running back for wanting to go to Wisconsin.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, that's the place where you're going to succeed. It's kind of proven there. I think there's a couple, one or two high school players that are still in on that haven't signed yet, but for the most part, I expect them to look at the junior college guys in the transfer portal. There's been no big name that's popped out yet, because I think any big name at this point is probably looking at programs that are ahead of Rutgers on the national pecking order. But I do think there's some junior college guys there. There's maybe, the one thing I keep hearing is that, there are New Jersey guys at other schools who want to come home. So far those guys haven't presented themselves, but maybe they will as we kind of get to spring practice. That's another thing too with the portal. Remember, Rutgers added McLean Carter and Kyle Peniston basically right when school was ending. So they still might hold spots open, get through spring practice when guys around the country see where they are on depth charts. And I also think too, especially, I know we're going to talk about quarterback here. I would think that whatever decision they want to make on quarterback, unless there's a no-brainer in the portal, you want to see Sean Gleason and Art Sikowski and Johnny Langan all on the field together for 15 spring practices in the spring game in that scheme before you make a major decision about quarterback.
I got to, coming home, and you're reminding me of something I want to mention. Sean Gleason on Twitter, to announce his coming home, quoted a Springsteen song. And, that usually would be enough, like, hey, look, he's quoting the boss and coming home. But you got, if you're really in Jersey, you got to pick the right Springsteen song. I got to tell you, Coach, pick and prove it all night. That's a good place to start. You're off to a good start here. I think that's good. If you had gone with if you'd gone with something like, Born in the USA, there are things you could do wrong here there are possible missteps with the Springsteen.
Yeah. How about Lost in the Flood would probably not go over well, right?
Oh man. No, that wouldn't be the great choice. Yeah.
It actually might be my favorite Springsteen song.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Right up there.
Song. All right. What were we talking about? I lost. Recruiting. Sarge, anything else? Or you want to go to football, basketball?
Let's talk about another sport.
Yeah, let's dive into them. All right, come on. This is exciting. Yeah, so huge win in Nebraska. And I get it. Nebraska's not very good, but for that team to win anywhere on the road is big. And for that team to win anywhere on the road without Geo Baker is big. And for that team to win on the road by 20 points, essentially lead the entire way without any, really threat to that is just huge. So I thought that was a big win. Sort of, I don't know if it changes the trajectory of the season, because I thought that's one they had to have no matter what happens. But it certainly puts, this game on Tuesday into just another stratosphere as far as of where this team can go if they beat Penn State. Sarge, give me a sense what you saw from that game, and do you have a better timetable for Geo Baker as far as when he might be back?
Yeah, he's going to be out indefinitely, and information on that front, is hard to.
What's indefinitely? 2 weeks, 6 weeks? We're going to see him next season.
If you look at that injury, it's generally about a month. Yeah, about a month. If you look at that injury, just from a general standpoint. Okay. Speaking about injuries, I guess you didn't get hurt when you jumped onto the bandwagon for basketball?
No, believe me, it was loaded with hay, the bandwagon. It's like
everyone's happy to have you on
Dave White's paperbacks. I just landed with a beautiful, like a pillow, this lovely fall, and then a welcoming embrace from Rutgers basketball fans.
Okay, so getting into back to hoops, I mean, there's a clear path for we're going to get Steve Pikiell in a little bit. We're going to obviously cover the game tomorrow, and he's going to I'm sure dismiss the question as far as NCAA bubble. Despite right now the metrics look good. There's 2 months to go before before it really gets serious. But there is a clear path. And they're obviously so dominant at home right now. They're 10-0 at home. So they have 9 Big Ten home games remaining. I'm not, they're not going to win all 9, obviously, but if they were to go 7-2, in those home games, that gets them to 18 wins. 18 wins, and then if they can get 2 or 3 road wins, say 2, and then so that's 3 Big Ten road wins overall. you have 20 wins going into conference tournament play, and you're squarely on the bubble. You probably need to win 1 or 2 games in the conference tournament, but you're probably talking about a team that's in the the middle of the pack of the Big Ten standings. At that point, they will be in the conversation. 7-2. If you look at the schedule, obviously the Penn State game will be a litmus test. Penn State's ranked 21st in the country, but right now, you look at the standings; they're right up there in the mix. A bunch of teams are at 2-1 in conference play, and Rutgers is one of them.
But here's the thing, guys. I know we said 7-2 at home. Why can't they go 9-0 at home? If they get past Penn State,
wow,
this town is going to be on fire. 1 and 2, the home schedule. It's tough. It's the Big Ten. It's the best conference in the country, as Steve Pikiell likes to tell us 5 times every time we meet him. But they're not really playing the heavyweights, like Michigan and Maryland, I think, are the 2 toughest home opponents after that. Those don't come until later in the year when the hay might be in the barn for this team. So I think there's a very good chance if they beat Penn State that the RAC becomes, one of those towering inferno venues where the visiting team just doesn't win. And at that point, if you somehow go 9-0 at home, and remember, they basically have a 10th home game because they're playing Michigan, their road game at the Garden. Almost at that point, if you go 9-0 at home,
9-0 at home, you keep on saying that. 7-2 seems like a wonderful ask.
But I just say,
somebody pull the emergency chain. 9-0.
If you go 9-0 at home, you need to win what, 2 more games on the road, and you're in the tournament. So this is the latest biggest game in the history of Rutgers basketball, but it's a pretty big one because
you got to win this one first. Win this one first.
Yeah, win this one first, and all of a sudden, this place is going to have hoops fever.
I will say this, guys, and I looked it up just because I was curious. Last year, the final team in for the Big Ten was Ohio State. All right, so they were 20-15, 8-12 in the Big Ten, which is tied for 8th. They won 1-1 in the Big Ten tournament. I couldn't find what their net rank, the net ranking was. But still, so 8-12 in the Big Ten, a couple of quality wins, obviously beat some top 25 programs. It ain't beyond reach, put it that way. And but this, again, makes this game even more important though, dude. They gotta win this one.
Yes, they have to win this one.
All right, so let's dive right into some Rutgers Insider questions. You guys had great ones this week. Really appreciate you answering as always. NJ.com /text. So, we have Cratch's breaking news on there left and right. Guys, if you're not on there now, you really should be on there now. Okay, I'm going to start with this one. Number 1 is the 2020 quarterback on the roster. Sarge, what do you think?
No.
Okay.
Well, I think Art's going to have every opportunity to win it, but if you're asking me whether or not there's going to be a quarterback who's going to have a chance to start, and yeah,
who is this mystery man?
I don't know. I think it's to be determined. I think obviously the grad transfer portal is a fluid thing, so I think it's to be determined at this point.
Cratch, do we have a strength coach and a special teams coach? 2 back-to-back questions here.
Strength coach, Kenny Parker is still the strength coach as of now. Mm-hmm. I would think that, look, the strength coach is is the right-hand man of every head football coach. So I would tend to think that Greg will get his own strength coach, eventually. But I will say this, and I've said this in the past, sometimes a coach comes in and, as long as the strength coach is, he feels they can have a relationship with each other, and this guy is a qualified professional, he keeps them. That's what happened with the Giants when Pat Shurmur got there. Obviously, he's no longer there now, but he just kept Ben McAdoo's strength staff there. But that being said, I would expect that Greg would make a change there, get his own guy at some point, and when that kind of change happens, I'm not sure, but I'll stick with my dream staff. Jay Butler, I'm sure, will come back at some point.
All right. This is a good one from somebody. Does Hobbs have his act together to capitalize on momentum with early renewals and additional season ticket sales? Now, obviously, this is more than just a Pat Hobbs thing. This is an institutional Rutgers deal. But, Sarge, have you heard anything? I mean, are people really, buying tickets?
Yes. So the first week, and we've put in for the numbers. We still have not received the numbers, but the first week there was from my understanding, the ticket office was flooded with phone calls. So the first week was really good. I talked to Pat Hobbs in late December 20th, and he said that there's going to be a big push coming after the holidays. And that he's optimistic that that what the momentum that was created in December is going to carry through. So again, we've asked for the numbers. The bar wasn't just low; it was on the ground from a season tickets number standpoint. So the numbers are going to look great from all accounts if they're able to retain. Last season's numbers, which was probably about 16,000. If they could get over 25,000, is going to be a huge number. Again, big push after the holidays. So, stay tuned.
Crash, this is quite literally a question that everyone has asked at least one time on Rutgers Insider. Is Raheem Blackshear coming back? Do we know anything?
It's still, in limbo at this point. He's apparently taken some visits. Again, I think it could be a situation where it's not a major rush. He still has time, as kind of teams figure out what they're going to do with the transfer portal. I will say this, I've been surprised by the seeming lack of interest in Raheem Blackshear. Because I think he's a really dynamic football player. I don't know if the way things kind of went sideways with the red shirt impacts him, or if it's just a situation where he's sort of seen by major programs as a luxury player more than an every down back. But the best answer I can give you is we just don't quite know yet.
All right. Any news on transfer portal targets and how many scholarships are left for February signing day? That's been a moving target from the beginning. I doubt you'd be able to answer that one, but are there names in the portal that we're not that are out there that we don't know, or what's going on with that?
I'll answer the scholarship question first. I was told by someone that Greg has been telling people that he thinks he's going to be able to sign a full class.
Okay.
So that would be, they've got 20 now, I think, in. So we're talking maybe 5 more.
Yeah.
5 or 6 more, if they kind of work some numbers out. So I would think that they're going to add not a whole lot of people, but they're going to add more than 1 or 2 guys in theory in the coming weeks and months. As for portal targets, the names that are out there are pretty much the guys. I think the one thing I think I'm intrigued to see is, given the time that Greg spent, away and watching football and researching and studying, preparing for this, is he going to be one of those guys where he gets a guy out of the portal and we're all kind of like thumbing through, media guides. Who is this guy? Who is this guy? And that guy shows up and produces for Rutgers. I almost wonder, is his success in the portal going to be not so much with the big names where everyone gets all excited because they're from New Jersey and they chose, they went against Rutgers back when they were in high school. Is he going to be the guy who gets the backup from Michigan that we've never heard of, and that's suddenly that guy is a starter?
All right, here's another one I like, and it's relevant because of, obviously, tomorrow night the rack's going to be packed. How would a rack expansion / renovation work, SARS? And we've talked to Pat Hobbs about this. He's got a pretty clear vision of what he wants to do with that building. How would it work? And does the fact that they are going full bore on the football building slide that way to the back burner?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so the idea of them adding more seats and swelling the capacity, which is about 8,000, that's not going to happen. If anything, they might actually take out some seating capacity in order to add a lounge, for high end donors. Right now, currently they're in the corner. It's less than ideal. What they really like to do with Pat Hobbs' vision is to take the media room, which is right over by 118 the old section 118, and turn that into a bar / lounge area where you get food and for the high end, front row, the big spenders will have access to that. Ultimately, the offices that are overlook the one end of the basket, He'd like to take the glass out of those and make that, a sitting area as well, make that a pavilion. So maybe that would add some seats, but I think that could be, something for a lounge type area too. Ultimately, those are the two big things that he'd like to get done. But as far as, adding a capacity, there's only so many things that you could do. The building was built in 1976, 77. By all accounts, the capacity is what it is what it is, as far as like fire codes and everything. I don't think they could really increase the capacity all that much.
Here's a question that relates to us, believe it or not. Any indication what Schiano's relationship and openness to the media will be like? And I think, it's an interesting dynamic because obviously he does have a national profile and knows a lot of people in the national media as well. He was pretty open when he was here last time. I mean, practices were open. He was available when you needed to talk to him. The other part of it is that he is not a big fan of leaks and of information getting out of his program. Sarge, you work with him closer than anybody. What do you think we're going to face here with him as the media person?
Yeah, it's a great question too. Greg Schiano is a big fan of having coverage, every day. He likes, Rutgers being talked about. How do you get that done? By having as much access as possible, especially during spring football and during training camp. I anticipate it being a lot more open than it's been. Is it going to be as open as it was back in the day where every single practice was open? If you remember, I'm old enough to actually remember his first couple of years where the fans had access to practices. I don't think that's going to happen, but, I do think that, there will be more stuff for the fans as far as, open practices for the fans come spring. I do think that he sees the benefit for opening it up. I think he, as far as you're right about the leaks, but here's the thing. Greg Schiano, I've already talked to him a few times about it and, talking to other people, like he really does understand the value of the media, especially in this market and what it could do for him. He also probably understands of having, negative coverage can do for him, how that can impact the program. So he's going to do what he can to try to control the narrative as best as possible.
Yeah, the one thing I will say I'm hoping for, and I've had a couple emails, very astute fans and readers who have noticed that under Ash and even at the end of Flood, the number of stories that we wrote that were in-depth profiles of players seem to go down. And I like the fact that readers noticed this and that it was a direct reflection of the access number one, of the losing certainly, but also two, of the access we had. Yeah. Whereas, Greg was open to us sitting down because they understand that if you're going to spend a half an hour talking to a kid, chances are the story is going to be a very positive story. So I'm guessing we're going to see that. I think that's going to be something that's going to be a nice benefit of having Schiano back. All right, Kratz, one for you from David Melman wants to know the threat to the program that Hafley presents, number one, and the threat to perhaps what Matt Rule might do if that's going to be a problem for Rutgers if he's with the Giants. What are your thoughts on those two?
I'll take Rule. I think obviously if you're Rutgers, it's not the worst idea in the world to have Matt Rule off the college board.
Right.
Whether it's pulling kids out of, a kid out of South Jersey every year. I think I went back in his four recruiting classes at Baylor. I think he's gotten like 6 or 7 signees from the state of Rutgers, meaning New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. I know some people have been worried that he's going to take Fran Brown with him to the Giants. One, if Fran Brown goes to the Giants, if Matt Rule would be hired as Giants head coach, he's going to owe Rutgers like $500,000, if not more. And that's chump change for the Giants, but I will say this, and it has nothing to do with Fran Brown and his ability. Greg has praised him as an on-field coach as well as a recruiter. The Giants, apparently one of their big issues with Shermer was they felt that his staff wasn't strong enough from a player development standpoint. I can't see the Giants shelling out an extra, $500,000 to hire a guy who's never coached in the NFL to be on Matt Rule's staff. Now, obviously, if Matt Rule stands on the table, but I would think Fran Brown is happy here. That's a pretty cumbersome buyout for an assistant coach, so I don't think Rutgers fans should worry too much about that. As for Hafley, I think a lot of it depends on whether Anthony goes there or not, but I think, he's a risk. I mean, he's a hot shot, young coach who's generated a lot of excitement there, and you're always going to have a hard time when it comes to, the big parochial schools in Bergen County, competing against BC. I mean, it just is what it is. So, I think in many ways, the challenge that Princeton wrestling and the other Ivy Leagues present to Scott Goodale and Rutgers, where, hey, it's hard to argue about, put aside athletics. It's hard to, recruit against an Ivy League degree. And I think in some ways, with BC, with that sort of culture and their tradition, it's hard to recruit against that for some kids. And you're just going to lose some recruits to BC, no matter whether or not you think your football situation is vastly superior.
I'm going to go out on a limb. I don't think that Greg is nearly as worried about Hafley at BC as the rest of us are. That's
probably true.
Probably true. All right. I think that's all we've got, people. We've done our best to get to as many as possible. Again, thank you for subscribing. Cratch, really quick. Sarge has to jump on a conference call here with Steve Pikiell addressing the media before the Penn State game. Anything else that we're missing here before we sign off? What do we got? Women's hoops.
Women's hoops, a big win, come from behind win over Purdue. They're playing extremely well. Obviously, they lost at home to Indiana. That was probably a game they had to win to break into the top 25. But if they keep winning, that'll take care of itself. I think I saw a wrestling question in our Rutgers Sports Insider. JoJo Aragon obviously was injured, medically forfeit out of the Southern Scuffle. I'm told he's 100%, so he should be ready to rock and roll. Wrestling steps in the Big Ten dual meet season Friday at Ohio State. Then they wrap it up at Michigan State on Sunday. First big 2-match road swing of the year for them. In the conference, at least, they went out west. So kind of an interesting weekend for them. They've got to get a split, I think, as they try to keep pace in this rebuilding year and still finish the season with a winning dual meet record. Never had a losing record under Scott Goodale. Obviously, they're not trying to start this year. And yeah, that's about it. So I think it should be a hootenanny at the Rack on Tuesday night, and I think it's going to be a big test to see where this kind of Rutgers men's basketball season goes. Looking forward to it. Love a big college basketball game. Fellas, great. This was a good podcast. A little off-season fun. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with another one, hopefully in a couple weeks. Thanks for listening.